with audio. All right, Sweaty Fantasy Football Podcast, episode number 5. We are over a month into the podcast. Um, I'm here with Braydon and Zach to talk some football. Right off the bat, I just wanted to say if you are not already, get in a Dynasty league that you trade all year round because it makes the offseason so much more fun. We're going to go over a big trade that happened that I made with Jacob in our league this week. But just off the bat, like it's so much fun if you're not in a league like that. Find some good solid people to get in a league with. So we're gonna go over some NFL news. We have a new segment. We'll start our naming our segments. This one will be called Trade Talk. And then we're gonna go kind of just some general NFL, some dark horses that we all have for the year, some sleepers, um, some teams that we think are gonna way outproduce where the consensus is on them right now. So we will jump into the news first. The big news of the week. I mean, this was absolutely massive. Frank Ragnow, center for the Lions, retired. And based off of the things that have come out, it was just kind of his body was falling apart and he couldn't really play football anymore, but it's massive. I mean, I don't you don't want to overreact and say the Lions are going to drop. The overall sentiment of this offseason has been fairly negative with the Lions losing their coordinators, and now with Ragnow gone, that's a pretty big loss.
Yeah, I don't want to overreact too hard. We know what we believe of Dan Campbell as a coach. It's not looking good. Brain drain is very real. I won't say we know that Super Bowl hangover is real. Obviously they didn't make the Super Bowl, but we watched them take crushing losses in the playoffs in back-to-back years, and those things are hard to come back from. They have a really low win total right now. I believe it's still at 10.5 if it hasn't risen, but seeing so many teams above them, where just last year they were the favorite to win the Super Bowl for a good chunk of last year. Um, it I don't want to overreact. I think that this team is going to be okay overall, but it's very easy to start to tell yourself a story about how the Lions just don't look the same going forward.
Yeah, I think this is like as a partial Lions fan with just as much Lions coverage I have on my team. This was hard to watch. Ragnar All Pro behind Panay, like this was the heart and soul of that offensive line. I don't think it's going to hurt too much as far as like the impact of the offensive line, but man, yeah, as a football fan, you definitely look at it and you go, man, what happened? Two devastating losses. But yeah, I would be leaning the under on their win total at 10.5 for sure.
Especially with that tough division that they have. I mean, all the teams are they're going to be pretty solid, so you could easily see them splitting the series against every one of those teams, going 1-1 against the other three teams. Ricky Pearsall, he tweaked his hammy. Um, we've talked about this before. Injury news isn't really something that we want to get too overreactionary to at this time of year, but I will say soft tissue issues like hamstring issues, those do tend to linger. And if you try to push it too soon, then it could be lingering. Just something to keep an eye on as OTAs finish out and we go into training camp. I think right now it's more just like these guys that you want to have breakouts, that you want to take a step up in year two. You don't want them to be missing a bunch of time at the beginning of the year. Um, but yeah, just something to monitor. I don't know if either of you two really have a take on that one.
Pearsall's been getting a lot of steam lately, as being like one of those year two breakout guys. I actually made a trade offer for him in our league, my main league. Really sad to see he's dealing with this, especially as someone who obviously missed a big part of the program last offseason because he was shot in the chest. But yeah, seeing him miss two portions of off season in a row is never a good sign, but I'm not going to overreact. I wouldn't change the trade offer I sent the other day because of the news. Hopefully he goes back and takes another look at it though.
I think it's a hard room to lose snaps at this time of year. Not going to overreact to the injury. We know what Pearsall's talent is to the offense. He's the man beater. He's not going to compete with the role that Ayuk or Jennings even bring to the offense. But man, it is a hard time of year to lose meaningful snaps, especially in such a locker room shift in San Francisco. It's definitely a keep an eye on. There's like rumors and reports about like even Cowing kind of utilizing Pearsall not being there and taking over snaps, but I'm not going to look too heavily into that. I definitely still believe in Pearsall, but something to monitor.
Joe Flacco is rumored. I mean, this time of year is all rumor mill. Joe Flacco's rumored to take an early lead on the Browns job. I want you guys to guess. I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. How many touchdowns is the most that George Pickens has thrown in a season in his illustrious? He's going into his fourth year.
Is that our second week in a row with a George fumble, a George Pickens misstep?
What did I say?
You said George Pickens. I can see
Oh
the
man, I
doc. I
meant
know
Kenny
you
Pickett.
meant Kenny Pickett.
Good
Yeah.
grief, this
I
guy.
don't know the stat. But I would. I mean, obviously, you're asking for a reason. I'm going to say something egregious like four. Give me four.
I, I got six. I'm pretty confident it's either six or seven.
It's seven. Yeah, it's brutal. So he had those two years where he played basically the full year. He had 7 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns, and then the year that he didn't play in Philly, he had two. But the 2 years that he was starters, he had 7 and 6. So that's what Joe Flacco's competing against. Ugh. Yeah, obviously for Jerry Jeudy, you kind of hope it's Joe Flacco, and if you own any shares of Njoku, you hope it's Flacco. But more than likely, you'll see most of these guys start at some point in the year, is kind of how it'll roll. You'll lose 3 games and move on to the next guy.
Who do you guys think starts the most games for the Cleveland Browns this year at quarterback?
I lean, man, it's like gross to say it, but it's either Dylan or Shador. I
I
think
agree.
that expecting one of them to come out a little bit slow in camp, they're learning playbooks. Those are things that Kenny and Joe have in their pockets. They have learned NFL playbooks before. I think like if we're barring injury, like no injury at all, I'm gonna lean Shador. I think Shador is more talented than Dylan. I'm never will be. Haven't ever been a Dylan Gabriel fan. Kenny Pickett stinks. That dude does not know how to throw 10 yards down the field. It's a check down or a flat route every single snap. So I'm gonna say Shador, as gross as that is to say, but could be Joe.
I think there's a pretty good chance that they go 0-6 through 6 weeks. And at that point, they go, we have to put in one of the rookies. And at that point, they go with whatever rookie they think is the best one. And that guy gets a good shot to start most of the year. Unless they go another 6 weeks, they're 0-12, and they give the other rookie a shot. I think they're in prime position to lose a ton of games. And so I actually, so Jacob has Kenny Pickett, and I was like, well, he has a chance to compete for the starting job. Let me go make a trade offer. And then I was like, what would I give up for Kenny Pickett? And I was like, well, I there's nothing I really want to give up for Kenny Pickett, so I'm just not even going to make an offer for a potentially starting quarterback in a super flex league, which is it's crazy to say, but that's where we are. He's not good. Donald Parham tore his Achilles. If you didn't know, he is on the Steelers right now. Tore his Achilles, so he's most likely going to be out for the year. Maybe make it back at the end of the year, but he's going to be out for the whole year. The Dolphins and Steelers have been in trade talks for Jonnu Smith, which would really stink for Jonnu. He kind of looked like he had a breakout last year. He did really good. I think he was the tight end four, something crazy like that. So to go to a place where you still don't know who the quarterback is and you have to split tight end reps with Pat Fryermuth would be kind of a death nail for his fantasy value, in my opinion. Either you guys have a take on, do you want to see Jonnu go to the Steelers? Do you want to see him stay in Miami?
With Fryermuth on her, I would not like Johnny Smith to go over there. Now, I think that Pat Fryermuth's role as like the inline starting tight end is pretty much safe. I don't think that Johnny really vultures a lot of targets. Obviously, we know that Johnny Smith did a lot of work with Arthur Smith in Atlanta when they were there. There was a lot of hate towards Johnny because he was getting a lot of those layup looks over Kyle Pitts. And I think that's kind of what Johnny is a little bit of a gadgety guy, someone you can roll out in 12 personnel and feel good about drawing plays up for. But yeah, I would love to see him stay in Miami, and that's purely a Fire Me Thunder take.
I think John is just so fun in a Mike McDonald or a Mike McDaniel offense. I think he's a perfect fit for what the tight end role is in that offense. You saw them prioritize a guy like Durham Smythe. They didn't address tight end for 3 seasons, and they finally get the gadget. It would shock me if they trade Jonnu. Doesn't shock me that Arthur Smith wants to bring Jonnu to Pittsburgh, but man, it would really shock me what is the direction that a coach who's on the hot seat, who just had like tight end success, while you had your other pass catchers out in that offense, it would really shock me if that move was made. But yeah, I know either. I don't own either, so it doesn't really matter to me.
Tavon Diggs is back at Patriots camp. Reports are he looks good off the ACL. It's the classic. He's ahead of schedule. If you're not ahead of schedule, you're behind schedule. That's just kind of the general rule of thumb in the NFL. Mr. Ledford, Braden's dad, if he's listening to this, I saw a video of him and the Patriots wide receiver coach working one-on-one with Jalen Polk. So maybe Jalen Polk breakout season incoming. It's not going to happen, but a man can dream.
Yeah, Jalen Polk is one of my favorite players of all time, solely because shortly after drafting him at the 304, right after I joined the league, Mr. Ledford traded me his 2027 first and his 2026 second for Jalen Polk. To this day, the biggest fleece I've ever gotten off. I don't feel great about it. I actually feel kind of bad about it. That's not really what I'm looking to do to somebody when I trade them a player, but
Wait, that's a
um,
joke, right?
it oh no, this is no, I'm being dead serious. That is what I got in return for Jalen Polk last offseason.
I
You can pull up the trade log. It's that
I
is
didn't
what I
remember
got.
that.
So I'm rooting for Jalen Polk a little bit. It's easy to tell yourself a story of how does it get worse from where it was here, but the problem is just who he was who he was as a wide receiver. He was a second round wide receiver. He was not like there were some holes in his game. Still very good as a prospect, but then he was billed as being like a super reliable hands guy and a good run blocker. And he came into the league and what was one of the worst run blockers as a wide receiver last year and just had an unacceptable drop rate. It's really hard to see him having any sort of bounce back whatsoever, especially with a new regime in there that didn't draft him and has drafted new wide receivers. Um, yeah, I think it's probably about over for Jalen Polk.
I can't believe he
Yeah,
got a
I look at
first
the
and a
wide
second.
receiver room.
Yeah.
Yeah, egregious trade offer. I look at the wide receiver room and I just question like who does he have to beat out? I think the capital they spent on Kyle Williams as maybe Kyle Williams' biggest truther to exist. I just don't think that Polk's going to take that role. Um, I think if Diggs is there, I don't think Polk's taking anything from the slot. And you kind of question what is the route here, especially with preseason legend Javon Baker tearing it up in camp. I don't know. I don't see a route to success, but he's talented enough. I liked him out of UW, so we'll definitely have to watch and see.
All right, moving on. This is our first segment, trade talk. So as I alluded to earlier, I had a big trade with Jacob that went down this week. Um, so I got Bo Nix, a 2028 first, and Zay Flowers. This is a PPR Superflex Dynasty League. This is our main league. Bo Nix, 28 first, and Zay Flowers for Caleb Williams and a 28 second. Zach, you want to kick it off with your trade grade?
Yeah, what I'm actually going to do here is I'm just going to read through my grade. It won't be obviously perfect because it's kind of geared towards the league. There was some conversation before the grade came out. So overall, just kind of an overview. I don't like this trade. I think that Jacob kind of came up behind Justin and put a bag over his head and just took him out into the middle of nowhere and left him there. But anyways, I graded you a C minus. I did specify that that was probably closer to a D plus than it was to a flat C. And kind of just what I touched on was Bo Nix is not anywhere close to Caleb Williams from a talent perspective. Draft capital tells you that. Some of the flashes we saw from both of them as prospects show you that. And now that is a lot of the argument from your side was Bo Nix is a better fantasy quarterback. Bo Nix is attached to a great offensive line. Bo Nix is attached to a great offensive play caller. But one of the hardest parts I have with letting Caleb Williams go for Bo Nix and essentially a first, because we'll just call the 2028 second for Zay Flowers. We'll call that kind of parallel parts of the trade. Is there were huge offers on the table for Caleb Williams. You actually just paid less than what 4 months ago, an absolute haul, a deal that involved giving away Jamar Chase to go and get Caleb Williams. We've talked on this podcast about how much of a monster Caleb Williams is. I think that going from a QB who right now is being valued as like a top 6 to 8 quarterback in Dynasty, dropping down to someone who will probably never be better than a QB 10. And you can very easily see him being worse than a QB 15. And only getting like a first out of it and a first 3 years from now in that case. And a first that we project to probably not be a mid, probably not be an early first, probably mid to late is where my estimation would be. I just think that it felt like you bought Caleb Williams high, you sold him low, and it was brutal. I gave Jacob's side of the trade. I give him a B plus. I actually said he was closer to an A minus than a flat B, just because the QB upgrade to me is awesome. I know Braden's kind of going to go into more detail. You guys will both go into detail on your sides with the quarterback about why you want to go to bat for each quarterback. But I do just believe the QB upgrade is awesome. I think he could have squeezed more value. Because you have expressed that you think that Bo Nix is a better fantasy quarterback out of Caleb Williams. But I don't think he really gave anything super significant up. A first in 3 years is not moving my needle all that crazy much. Yeah, great work, Jacob. I know you'll be listening to this. Great work, Jacob.
My thoughts and opinions is I mean, Zach kind of just touched it. Is you traded a Jamar Hall for Caleb, and all 4 episodes so far, it's been Caleb to the moon. All offseason, it's been Caleb to the moon. The day that Ben Johnson signed in Chicago, I remember you and me celebrating in the chat because I'm a Roma Dunze holder. I think that the potential of this Bears offense is just so grand. Ben Johnson, besides Kyle Shanahan, Andy Reid, McVay, is the best football mind, and I think we would all agree when it comes to the offensive side of the ball we've seen in probably the last 10 years. Ben Johnson's play sequencing is just incredible. When you look at the tools that this Bears offense has, there's not a lot of ways that he's not going to be scoring fantasy points. I think one of the things that you look at Bo and you look at what Caleb did last year that you kind of compare and contrast is I didn't think when you watch the game film, Caleb wasn't effective on the ground. The time he had yards is when he was running for his life. The areas where Bo succeeded with his legs was picking up first downs. He was moving the chains a lot with his legs. He had 5 rushing touchdowns and 1 receiving touchdown. Caleb didn't have a single even rushing touchdown. I think it's hard to kind of look at a Ben Johnson offense and say, how's a mobile quarterback going to play in that? But I just look at what both teams have, and I think great offensive mind in Sean Payton, great offensive mind in Ben Johnson, great offensive line in Denver. We predict a great offensive line in Chicago. Then you look at the weapons and you say Caleb can get points in so many different ways than Bo can. And that's not even coming from a talent perspective. I feel like I could go up and down a wall right now on the talent difference, the difference between the two. On draft day, as a Seahawks fan, I vocalized to everyone I watched the draft with that if Seattle drafted Bo Nix, I would fall to my knees in tears and have a hard time rooting for my team. I have to put that bias aside because I've never believed in him as a prospect. What he did last year was very impressive. But I think all that being said, the upside of Caleb is we talked about him coming out of the draft. Maybe as we see him now, he's not quite what people were saying, but he was being compared to a Kyler on the ground and a diet Mahomes in the air. And it's hard to compare anybody to Mahomes, but the arm talent is just there. So, yeah, I don't think Zay Flowers is a positive in this trade at all. I think 28 second for Zay is cool, but Zay is going to lose you more weeks and he's going to win you more weeks. I look at your wide receiver room and I just don't know where he's going to fit in. And then I look at the first and I say, man, 3 years out. I predict it to be later first than earlier. And yeah, I think you could have if you were wanting, I know you were higher on Bo Nix, but if you were wanting to sell Caleb, I think you could have gotten a Bo Nix and 2 first type of talent from literally anybody else in the league. But yeah, that's where I sit. Justin, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So when I clicked accept on this trade, I was actually worried that Jacob was going to get clowned for the worst fleece known to mankind. Wow. So, I mean, so first off, just looking at like different rankings out there on the internet, the fantasy footballers dynasty rankings, they have Bo at 7, Caleb at 10. Fantasy pros have Caleb at 9, Bo at 11. And Keep Trade Cut, our favorite ranking system on the internet, has Caleb at 10 and Bo at 11. So just generally, the gap isn't very big. I personally think that Bo is better than Caleb for Dynasty, like Zach already said. If you look at last year, if you take the first 4 weeks of the year out, which kind of a fun fact about the first 2 weeks of the season, um, Bo, Caleb, and Jaden Daniels combined for, let's see, I wrote it down. I think it was 6 picks and no touchdown passes. So right out of the gate, everybody was a little stressed about the quarterback class. It all turned out fine. But if you take out those first 4 weeks, Bo Nix was scoring 21.5 points per game. Like that's not a low number. That's not a player coming out. Everybody said he's played in college so long. We know his floor and it's pretty close to his ceiling. Um, but he was the quarterback 6 overall last year. He scored 21 and a half fantasy points per game. I mean, that's a player he has Sean Payton. Like the argument is, well, he might be a system quarterback. He's still in that system. He has Sean Payton. He has Pro Football Network has them as their highest. They were the highest graded offensive line last year, highest graded this year. They have a great scheme, a great coach, a great O line. They drafted R.J. Harvey, which I think you could argue that both ways as far as a negative and a positive. Um, I think he'll get a lot of checkdowns to R.J. Harvey. RJ Harvey might vulture some touchdowns, but if Bo gets 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns, that's enough on the ground that it doesn't bother me too much. Um, and again, if you take out those first 4 weeks, he threw 29 touchdowns and 8 picks. Like that's really solid numbers. And so if he can be somewhere around the 30 touchdown mark, throw 5 to 10 picks, I think he's gonna be a great fantasy quarterback now. And Sean Payton's 61. So when I was thinking about it, my guess is Bo will probably be the starter for like 10-ish years. He'll be about 35. Sean Payton will be 71. They probably both retire together. I don't know. Sean Payton might be a Belichick and work until he's old. But the point is, I think Bo is criminally underrated as far as his ceiling. Everybody says that his ceiling isn't as high as Caleb's. And I also want to make another thing clear that this is not an anti-Caleb Williams take. I'm still insanely in on Caleb Williams. I just view Bo as he's as good or better, and I got a first on top of him. So if you view, as I do, Bo Nix and Caleb is kind of a wash, Bo, in my opinion, is better, then you get a first and Zay Flowers for a second, which is a massive steal. And what you said, Braydon, about where he's going to fit in, for me, he's just kind of a bye week fill in. Right now, I think he slots in about my wide receiver five-ish. So I'll have Puka and Drake London, Marv, Ayuk, Jennings, Waddle, and then Zay. So really, it's just bye weeks or injuries. Those guys can kind of mix in. He definitely won't be starting every week. I might start him week one just because they play Sunday Night Football. You kind of get that week one itch. You want to see your guys play. Um, but yeah, this is more of a pro Bo Nix take in my opinion than it is an anti Caleb Williams. And I do understand. Like it was tough for me to trade him away. I just thought I fleeced him so bad that I couldn't not click the button.
I think it could age well. I think that everything you're saying is very valid. I think that all those things could happen. I don't see a lot of meat left on the bone with Bo Nix. And he's ranked one spot behind. I mean, I'm looking at Keep Trade Cut right now. Like you said, it's our favorite. I don't see a lot of meat left on the bone for Bo Nix. I don't see how he really does a whole. I could be wrong, but I could. I mean, we've seen flashes from Caleb that look like that top five, that real true superstar quarterback with Caleb. I believe the play caller is better. I believe that the weapons are better. I believe the talent is better. But again, you got a first on top. I think it could age well. Maybe I was a little harsh. I guess I didn't drop it to a D. I gave it a C minus, but um, makes me nervous, and it's especially funny for you. Even we even got an appearance from your wife in the chat, giving you a hard time about trading away your superhero Caleb Williams. You guys actually have a interesting bet that culminated in discussion from this.
Oh, we
I'd
do.
love to hear more about that.
Yeah, we got a jersey bet. Bo Nix versus Caleb Williams straight up. I think. Was it fantasy points total or per game? I can't remember.
Total.
Total.
It's total, yeah. So Jersey bet, fantasy points total, Bo Nix versus Caleb Williams. I think it's pretty solid.
There's a 10 game clause. You do have to start 10 games in
Oh yeah.
this. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. Again, I could go up and down a wall of all the ways Caleb's gonna have the potential to score points. One of the things Zach and I have talked a lot about off screen is the extension of the run game and what that provides in or did for the Lions last year, and how what is that going to do this year when you have guys like DJ Moore, you have guys like Luther Burden. I mean, we even saw Laporta get handoffs in Detroit. Like Colson Loveland absolutely could handle some of those. I think there's just so many ways that this team scores points, and I do think they come out slow. And I made this bet thinking the Bears are going to have to build the offense around Caleb rather than Caleb adapt to the offense. And I do think that they're in a hard division. I don't think they come out just dominant right away. I think Caleb's got to learn some things. He's going to progress through the year, but I still am going to double down. I don't think even dating back 2 weeks, like we were talking about, Caleb at 4,000 yards plus 400 was
hmm
something we were all like locked in on. I wouldn't bet plus like I would fade Bo Nix 4,000 yards. So then it comes down to touchdowns, and I think that Caleb has a chance to get more touchdowns, and I think the running game has a chance to be pretty even if some touchdown variance goes. I also look at the Bears running back room, and DeAndre Swift is by no means a touchdown hawk. He's not great on the goal line. Roshan Johnson quite literally is only good at the goal line if you're within 2 yards. So those scenarios where you're 4, 5, 6, 7 yards out, I think we could see Caleb get some variance there, because no rushing touchdowns for Caleb is a little bit crazy. I wouldn't bet over 4 or 5, but I do think we see that variance trimmed down a little bit there.
Well, Ben Johnson's going to scheme up some passing touchdowns for his tackles. We've already seen this. He his infamous plays are the ones where his tackles report as eligible, if nothing else, to be a decoy and maybe to get a couple passing touchdowns. So you could see that at the one come out in jumbo and have a offensive lineman leak out, which isn't something you say very much. Usually it's a tight end that leaks out or a fullback or something. Um, but yeah, I think
Zach,
it's
can
gonna.
you find a line for a Darnell Wright touchdown this year? I don't know if that's our worst bet of the offseason, but Justin, you might be on to something. Come on.
Well, I think the problem is you need some obscure third round or third string guy that shows up and like the graphics guy has to like scroll really really fast to try to find the button because he's got DJ Moore and he's got all of his guys queued up and then some backup guard gets a touchdown and he's like, "Oh shoot, we don't have a graphic for this." Yeah, I'd be interested to see if there is a line for one. Um, Anyways, yeah, that was our big trade of the week. And kind of just to reiterate what I said at the top, like it's a lot of fun to do trades in the off season and have like a really long discussions with people in the middle of June when we just got under 100 days away from NFL football and which is awesome. It's can't wait. Um, but it's so much fun to like have trade conversations and clown on people who you think lost trades or to say, it's just fun to chop it up, talk some football in June.
Were you having fun when you first got back in the chat? You thought you got one over on Jacob. You were not, you weren't like snippy or anything like that, but like I could tell that you were not having like a great time when the whole league came to Jacob's defense on that one. What was honestly going through your head? Like what were the emotions in that moment?
Okay, so the emotion started up here when I saw the trade and I was checking my rankings. Um, and then I ran the trade through Keep Trade Cut just before I accepted it and I was winning like 15,000 to like 9 and I was like I was like, "Jacob, are you good if I accept this?" And he said, "Yeah, go for it." I mean, I was like way up here. And then I accepted it and then I was like, "Dang, I just traded Caleb Williams. I think I got a lot back for him, but I that kind of sucks." And then Braden's like, "Justin, what are you doing?" And then everybody just piled on. I was like, "Well, that sucks." And I was like, "Did I just fleece him?" Every- hmm. Yeah, it
It
was a little bit tough to
there
go
was a
for.
quick
Oh,
sorry,
go
go
for
ahead.
it.
I was gonna say there was a quick bidding war. My first thought, the first thing I said in the chat when it went through was, "It's a great day to own Justin Picks."
I
And
had to see
Braden
that.
said shortly after, "I'm buying, I'm buying Justin Picks for anyone who's selling." We got Micah in the chat with the what the f diagram. It was very funny to witness.
I will say being in this league is it's special because of how much goes into these trades. Knowing that a Caleb Williams trade was going on and nobody had any idea. It's just electric in June. I mean, we
Yeah.
talked about I've talked about with multiple people in this league, like what dynasty asset is Caleb? I believe he's closer to 10 than he is 20. I would be interested to see what Keep Trade Cut has overall and where Bo is overall. But man, yeah, what an electric trade to have. Um, I think that Micah is so funny in his reactions, especially to trades. But Micah did have some validity of like, okay, if you were gonna sell Caleb, and I get you're higher on Bo, so maybe that's where the disconnect is. But if you were gonna sell Caleb, to not have a running back come back where your running back three is Isaiah Pacheco is just like mind blowing to me. It
I
definitely
will
was.
say
But if you're higher on Bo, you're higher on Bo.
this may shock you, but I've already been in talks to trade the 28 first to get a running back. I know everybody's
I'm just
shocked.
kidding. I
Oh.
just yeah, I believe so. Would you let me guess who it is? If would you admit who it is on air if I
Yeah.
guessed?
Yeah, I would.
Ooh, let me search up any 26-year-old running back or older. Um,
Who else
He
is
is a
buying 28 picks this time of the year?
m- my first thought goes to Josh Jacobs, and I know it's probably not because Mike is a little bit
no.
ridiculous. Maybe Jonathan Taylor. Is there a world where it's Jonathan Taylor?
No, I don't. I'm not very big on Jonathan Taylor. We talked about it last week on the flag plants. Zach and I are both pretty out on him with the current situation. As much as I like to joke that Danny Dimes is going to be great just because I picked him up for nothing. Um, no. I mean, I'll tell you who it is. I don't think he listens to this podcast. I was trying to go get CMC.
I thought you were
I
talking
like the
about
move.
me, honestly. I really did think you were talking about me.
Oh, oh no, I've
We
already had
did have a
trade
brief
discussions.
conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, we have had brief conversations, and I'm sure we'll have a couple more. That pick is
Absolutely.
that pick is moving at some point, probably in the next month. And it's Trevor's pick, so whatever you think about Trevor in 28.
Not a Brian
I'm just
Robinson guy, huh? Sad,
so
sad day.
for a first, yeah. It was what
Eh,
did you
could
offer?
give a
It was
second back. It was your 26 second, which come on, top three, right? For 20 your 28 second and Brian Robinson, or your 26 second and Brian Robinson for that 28 first. So move up a couple
okay.
years, pick up a guy who's useful now. Bro,
So
I would have
Caleb's,
even thrown in Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, bro. Like
why didn't you lead with that?
uh,
Okay, Braden, just for the record, Caleb Williams is 23 on Keep Trade Cut. Bo Nix is 26.
Who's in between them? Can you tell me who's 24, 25?
Nico is 24, Marv is 25.
Dang, man. Marvin or Bo? Who would you rather have on your team?
Well, both. Um, oh, that's tough. That's really tough.
Marvin's been getting jacked though. Have you seen Marvin's work?
oh, dude.
Oh man. I mean, super flex, I might have to give the lean to Bo. Um, yeah, that's tight. That's actually a good one by Keep Trade Cut. First good one I've seen. Okay.
First good one you've
Um,
seen. I'm looking at Drake May QB7 4 spots ahead of Bo Nix, and I'm thinking, yeah, that sounds about right.
All right.
no
Pump
comment on
the
that one.
brakes.
Is that
Pump
a
Okay.
good
the
segue into
brakes.
our
Drake
next
May is
section?
no Michael Penix, bro. I don't want to hear it.
Oh, we're digging deep into the off season. Okay.
Oh
All right, we'll be
man.
right
We've
back.
talked a lot about Bo Nix here. Do we want to get into some of our dark horses? I think we could segue pretty cleanly from Bo Nix into that if you want to take a
Yeah.
lead there, Justin.
Yeah, that segues pretty good into my pick. Plot twist. It rhymes with Deefs, Zach. My sleeper team rhymes with Deefs. See if you can get. Okay, we'll be right
Oh
back.
man.
Doesn't actually rhyme with Deefs. That was a Chiefs joke for team, not player. Um, so the team that I picked to be my dark horse for the year is the Broncos. So when I was doing my research for the Bo Nix trade, um, I was just kind of going back and reminding myself of what they did this offseason. And they spent a couple picks. I mean, they got RJ Harvey and Pat Bryant. We'll see if Pat Bryant ever does anything. But they're fully taking advantage of the Bo Nix rookie contract. And I think it's pretty easy to say that the most overpowered item that an NFL team can have is a locked and loaded rookie quarterback because you don't have to pay him a lot and you can still win games with him. And it's pretty clear, whatever you think about Bo as far as like where he slots in, it's pretty clear that what they saw from him is going to be enough that they think he's their franchise guy. And if he falls off a cliff in 3 years, then they might have to re-roll. I don't think he will. He is their guy. So this offseason they invested pretty heavily on defense. They got Jahdae Barron at I believe it was 17. It was somewhere around there. Um, I obviously believe in Bo. They got Evan Ingram. I mean, Evan Ingram isn't like a massive needle mover where you say, well, this is an elite team because they have Evan Ingram now. But I think it is an upgrade for the pass catchers. They have, like I said earlier, PF Pro Football Network. They have the Broncos rated as their highest graded offensive line. So they have an elite offensive line. They had an elite defense last year. They went and got Jahdae Barron. They signed Hufunga and Greenlaw. They signed McGlinchey last year. They're kind of just becoming the Denver 49ers back from when the 49ers had Purdy on a rookie contract. Is kind of how it feels. Now it's just Bo Nix on a rookie contract and signing all these guys. So their defense is incredible. Their offense is really good. Per Sports Illustrated, they were seventh in total defense and third in scoring defense in 24. So they already had a good defense. They draft a first round corner, add some really good players. Um, I just think part of what we talk about with Caleb Williams and the Bears is the struggle of being in such a good division, and the Broncos struggle with that too. I mean, I'm kind of a little bit surprised that neither of you put the Raiders as your dark horse. That's kind of like the popular NFL pick. And like everybody's like, oh, everybody's sleeping on the Raiders, and so everybody is not sleeping on the Raiders at the same time because everybody's saying that everybody else is sleeping on them. And then you have the Chiefs. We know what the Chiefs are. The Chargers are really good. They got better this offseason. So like they have a really, really tough division. Their win total right now is at 9.5. So obviously Vegas believes in them because that's pretty high, especially for that tough of a division. Um, but they upgraded their already really good defense. They have a good offense. I obviously believe really strongly in Bo Nix. And so when you have an elite, I'll call him elite quarterback, a great defense, um, I see you two, you're not ready to call Bo Nix elite. See, okay, to jump back to the trade, I knew that you guys were very anti Bo Nix. And so when I made that trade, I was like, okay, I think I fleeced. I'm expecting a little bit more of a middle of the road reaction just because you guys are massively out on Bo Nix. But for the sake of this argument, I'm going to say he's elite. Um, and so just with that good of a defense, that good of an O line, RJ Harvey's good. Obviously, we know what Sean Payton is. He's won a Super Bowl. He's coached for a long time. Like he's a and like you like Ben Johnson for the way he calls plays. We don't know what he's going to be like as a head coach. Some players are really good play callers and not a good head coach. I'm not betting on that. Like I said, I think the Bears are really, really good, and Caleb's going to be really good. But like Sean Payton is a guy that you're not worried about when the clock is winding down, knowing when to call a timeout and getting his quarterback under control if he needs to. And so I just think this is a phenomenal team. Again, tough division, but it's a phenomenal team. They only got better this offseason, and I think they're a dark horse to maybe even win the AFC West. It's going to be tough with those teams, but I think they have a real shot to win the AFC West.
I only have my hard-earned money on them to win the AFC West. I have a few different division winners parlays with the Broncos taking that division. That they are my pick.
I love the Broncos this offseason, and that might shock you a little bit because of how much I don't really believe in Bo Nick's skill set. But I do believe is on the football field, fantasy points aside, he's being maximized. I think RJ Harvey, a touchdown guy in college, he has 28 from in last year. You bring in Evan Ingram to maximize the middle of the field. Off the line is just as good as it is. And my draft reaction was Jahdae Barron was the best pick of the first round. It felt like the biggest steal. It felt like that was not who they wanted. It ended up, and they said, okay, we're gonna maximize our already incredible corner room and secondary room, to be honest, and just add the best player available. I really like where the Broncos are at. I think that you can just tell a few stories of maybe how this team doesn't beat the other teams in their division. I think that they'll split games with the Raiders, probably split games with the Chargers, and can they split or sweep with the Chiefs is where that's going to come down to. I don't know. But yeah, I if Zach or if you didn't bring this to the table, Zach or I were going to. Um, Sean Payton just wins. That's kind of what he does. He may be a massive dirtbag, but he just wins. Um, I'm not betting against a team like this. They got to the playoffs and they got absolutely exposed. Yes, they did run into the Bills, but they did get exposed that they are not built to shoot out with a team. And I think that in the division, I think that when you watch who like what the other teams in the division did is the Chargers added true running back, complimentary back and Najee. They added Trey Harris. I like the tight end Gadsden. I'm not obviously super high on him, but I like the direction that's going. Top 10 coach, top 10 quarterback. I'm going to buy in there. And then I also look at Pete Carroll, Geno, good O line, Ashton Genty, Brock Bowers in the direction of that team, as well as Chip Kelly. I don't feel like enough analysts are kind of talking about what Chip Kelly are we going to see in the NFL. I think there's a lot of variance in that division, and I'm a little bit scared of it, but if you didn't bring it to the table, I was going to because the odds are there's just so many routes to that they do give the Chiefs a problem for the first time and get the division.
Comfortably the best defense in the division, in my opinion. Hard to bet on a team who has the worst coach and worst quarterback in the division. But I mean, it could happen.
You were talking about the Raiders, right?
Oh no, Geno Smith versus Bo Nix. So we're talking about talent here. This isn't a fantasy conversation.
Would either of you actually take Bo Nix or take Gino over Bo Nix?
For my team, the 49ers, yes. What, like, not even remotely close. I'd rather have Geno Smith than Bo Nix.
Yeah, I'm with Zach here. I think that like in our league especially, we have a lot of like harsh Seahawks fans, and there's some bias there. But the things that Gino did we have not seen in the potential that this offense has, which is a true running game that's going to commit to the running game and a true O line. Gino had a bad O line every year he was in Seattle, and he mitigated pressure time and time again. I'm going to take Gino because one, I trust him to throw the ball more than 33% of the time, past 9 yards down the field. Bo Nix, check down merchant. Yeah, it's Geno Smith for me. It's not close.
If the Broncos and the Seahawks switched offensive lines preseason, I'd go as far as to say the Broncos would have been in the Cam Ward sweepstakes, and the Seahawks would have won at least one playoff game.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, Braden, you brought lots of stats to the table from cooking Bo Nix at the end of last season. And one of the things that sticks out is he's not good at when there's pressure in his face. Part of why I'm betting on Bo Nix is because the situation is so good, but I think you're right. I think if they switched and Bo Nix was getting pressure in his face all the time, he might be out of the league in a year or two. Anyways, the situations
Yeah,
are
I
what they
think,
are, and so they're good.
yeah. I think Bo Nix, again, when there's no pressure in his face, like he can command an offense. And I think Sean Payton's designed, and we see that in the offseason moves of bringing in Harvey, bringing in Ingram, bringing in Pat Bryant. Didn't know who he was before draft, but I like
Hmm.
the fit in Denver. But I look at it and I say, man, when you get into the playoffs, a true dark horse we're saying is going to win a playoff game and make a run at a Super Bowl. I I don't think you can win a playoff game against some of these AFC teams with this roster because Bo Nix will not handle pressure consistently how he did. Obviously, there were a few games last year where he beat the narrative, I mean, first drive against the Bills in the playoffs, he threw a 60-yard touchdown.
Hmm.
Now they didn't score again the rest of the game, but
No.
it looked good on that first drive.
Everybody said, are they going to
And
give
then
the
I
Bills
turned
a
the
run
game
for
off.
their money? Are they? It's 7-0. Are they going to give the Bills a run for their money? Yeah, they didn't. At no point for the rest of the game was it even remotely competitive. But it was a fun story, like 2 minutes into the game.
Yeah, I think one last thing, that defense is going to be legit. I think I, I feel very comfortable saying top five defense next year in Denver. You tell me it's top two, like it's so easy to look at that back seven and what they're going to be able to yeah, if they stay healthy, like it's very easy to talk myself into that being the best defense in the league next year.
Agreed. All right, which one of you guys wants to go next?
Good.
All right. So there are a few teams I wanted to take here. Either team in the AFC West I wanted to kind of bring to the table. I was going to go the Raiders, but because I gave them some love a couple weeks ago, I'm going to go a little bit of a different route. I was evaluating some of the NFC, and I just didn't love a lot of the avenues in the NFC. I kind of looked at either the Rams, adding Devontae Adams, maybe making a last push with Stafford, but not really going to go there. I'm going to go with the Jaguars. And I can tell myself a lot of ways that this Jaguars team does go. They do go on a little bit of a run. Maybe they win the division, they play a game at home in the playoffs, and they win a game. And then they host somebody who doesn't travel very well, and maybe they get to the championship. I don't think a Super Bowl is in the outcomes with a first year head coach, but I do think a playoff win can be. Um, I think that this roster, I liked their roster last year. I liked what the direction of the team was going. I liked the edge rushers. I liked the Mason Smith interior D lineman pick last year. I was starting to lean that this defense could start to to trend in a really positive direction. Obviously, I didn't, and I was dead wrong. But I'm gonna double down. I think that some of the picks they've made in this draft pair really well with what they did last draft. And I can just tell a story where Liam Cohen offense, they win the division and they play at home and they win a playoff game. I think one of the things that I bring to the table with this argument is Trevor Lawrence has won a playoff game before where he was down four scores in that game. I think you add Travis Hunter, you add Patrick McCarry from the Ravens, which is just such a slept on move from the offseason. Started at almost every position on the O line. In those first couple weeks in Baltimore, he was kind like their offensive line was struggling, keeping Lamar safe. And then when they slid him to left guard, it was like night and day difference. I think he could provide that boost to this O line. I think that with the additions of Jordan Lewis, Darnell Savage, Travis Hunter into this secondary gives you a little bit of hope. Well, I think every sports fan like looks at the team and says, okay, if they're in games and they don't have to play cover zero with a Doug Peterson led defense every game, like maybe there's a hope there. I think this team can score points, and I think that in their division they could come out with a positive record, maybe an 11-6 or even up to 12-5 just because of the division. So that's the team I'm bringing is the Jaguars.
You want to talk about a completely flipped division from the AFC West, where you can make an argument for every team um, winning that division and getting out, and maybe even, I mean, there's obviously some teams in there that are up there for Super Bowl favorites. To this division, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago with Zach's favorite bet being a parlay of this division. And I think you can get some pretty good value out of this division just because every team has a path to being so bad. I mean, they did make a lot of upgrades. They were just drafting fifth overall, and then moved up to two. So I mean, last year with the Doug Peterson, that was an absolute dumpster fire. I do like that they did fill a lot of positions of need. You could argue that Travis filled two. We'll see how he's used at the NFL level, but I mean, obviously adding, and we can't forget about Baishal Tootin. I mean, that's really just like the linchpin of this whole offseason. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I mean, they have a good team. The division's there to take it. I think this also becomes a little bit of a Trevor Lawrence bet. If Trevor Lawrence falls on his face again with Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter, then I think you have to start having conversations about potentially moving on from Trevor Lawrence. And I don't know what his contract situation looks like, but he's been given a lot of time. And if he falls flat on his face again this year, it's tough. it's kind of one of those situations where he's set up in a position where you don't think he will just because he has such elite talent around him. Um, I'm not a big Trevor Lawrence believer. That's been kind of one in our league. That's been one of the biggest debates is the Trevor Lawrence. We have some guys that are pretty firmly on the Trevor Lawrence side, some guys that are pretty firmly on the anti-Trevor Lawrence side. But I think, like I said, with this division and with these skill players that he has around him now, I think that this is a really good team that might even steal a playoff win from somebody who overlooks them.
Yeah, I can see it. I can tell myself the story. To me, you need everything to go right for this team. You cannot be one of the 16 most injured teams in the league and have this be a playoff game winning team. You cannot have Trevor Lawrence take time to kind of gain back what we saw from him in the year where I think he threw for 4,000 and he won a playoff game. I think that was year two from him. He has to do it right away. The team has to take to the new scheme right away. Uh, uh, Tra- Travis Hunter needs to make an impact on both sides of the ball right away, and they need to stay healthy. I can tell myself the story. I am not going to be shocked if they are in the playoffs in January. But you need everything to go right for sure. It'll be interesting to see the direction they go if some things go wrong, especially not having their own first round pick next year.
Yeah, that's true. That's a big one. Because if you fall flat on your face and you're the fourth overall pick, it's hard to have a conversation about moving on from T-Law when you don't have a first. Because if you completely bomb and you have the number two overall pick and you like the quarterback there, then you cut T-Law and you move on or you trade him for a fourth or something. But if you don't have your first overall pick, then you're stuck in a Bryce Young for an extra year. And I mean, the Bryce Young one actually it seems like it's working out, but you get stuck in you're just going to play Bryce Young for an extra year because you don't have an option to go get a quarterback.
Yeah.
All right, Zach, you want to round us out with the Pats?
Yeah, I do. I am going to go with the Patriots. I put the Packers in the dock as well. They were my initial team. I have a hard time bringing a 20-1 contender as a dark horse. I think they're being a little slept on. They're not getting talked about very much. I think they're interesting, but the Patriots are going to be a little bit of a homer pick. They're going to be who I talk about, a homer. I'm not necessarily a Pats fan, but I am a Drake May owner, as I alluded to earlier. Um, and here's kind of the take. They are right now 60-1 to win the Super Bowl this year. They are the longest odds that we've talked about on the pod. They are obviously the furthest away. They were picking top four this year. Their roster last year was the worst in the NFL. It's very easy to see how they are a very dark horse to talk about. But I think what's happened this offseason is they may have had the largest floor upgrade of any team in the league. You bring in a guy like Mike Vrabel, who perennially had the Titans not only as a playoff team, but a contending playoff team, a team that you did not want to see in the first round of the playoffs. He won playoff games with Ryan Tannehill. He won playoff. He was the number one seed in the AFC with the team that had the most salary cap adjusted missed games due to injury that year. He is a floor lifter. He is kind of a culture guy. I think we could see a defense that has pieces. They have guys like Christian Gonzalez, who is an amazing corner. Christian Barmore missed a lot of last season, but was really flashing. Keon White is a stud on that defense. I think if we get someone who really knows what he's doing and can really elevate a defense, we could see this team return to form and maybe be a top 12-ish defense. And then kind of getting back into that conversation of we talk about how hard it is, how uncommon it is to see a top 10 coach, top 10 QB combo miss the playoffs. I don't think we're in a place yet where we're willing to put Mike Vrabel as a top 10 coach. I don't think we're at a place yet where we're willing to put Drake May as a top 10 quarterback. But I think it's very easy to tell the story how midway through the year or down the stretch of the season, we are having both of those conversations. All Mike Vrabel has to do is replicate 75 to 80% of what he did in Tennessee, and he will be back in those conversations. He is actually a top three candidate to win Coach of the Year right now. We've seen him do it before. We've seen him be in these top 10 coach conversations before. In the 2020 through 2022 seasons, I looked at some old articles talking about who the best coaches in the league were. He consistently was falling between the 7 and 13 range. If he gets back to that, and if Drake May takes the step that the consensus is that we think we can see him take. He had some amazing underlying metrics last year, like completion percentage over expectation, his success rate as a rushing and a scrambling quarterback. And as I mentioned earlier, Keep Trade Cut already has him in the top 10, the top 8 quarterbacks in the league. Granted, that's a little bit fantasy weighted due to the rushing upside, but it's a part of the game. If we see both of those people come in and take that step, I think that we could be having a conversation of them maybe being a wild card team, being a strong 5 or a 6 seed, and possibly going on the road and stunning a team that is not ready for them.
I think the worry for me is, does this team have enough offensive firepower to get there? The aforementioned Jalen Polk is one of the receivers being brought up. Kyle Williams, Stephon Diggs, Pop Douglas, Demario Douglas. They don't really have. I mean, nobody besides Micah really buys into a 31-year-old receiver coming off of an ACL tear. That's kind of a Micah is gonna Micah thing to do, and then try to defend it. I mean, come on now. I don't know. I mean, outside of Travion Henderson, I mean, Ramondre Stevenson's pretty cooked. I mean, he can come in and do some complimentary work to Travion, but I mean, Travion's really their only weapon. So are we going to see some kind of RPO game where it's basically just either Drake runs crazy or Travion runs crazy? Because I don't see where else on the offense this is going, unless we see some players take some steps way above where they're projected. I mean, this isn't even like a wide receiver two. This isn't even a CD Lamb who we think has some potential and then explodes one year and goes to wide receiver one. This is some guys that are like in the 30s and 40s at the wide receiver position going. Anyways, I don't see the offensive firepower being there. And Vrabel is a
I
good
love the
coach.
defense. I mean, I love the defensive structure. I mean, how many free agent starters did they sign on the defensive side of the ball? I couldn't tell you. It was over five. They really went from a potential defense to, like, I would consider them a top 10 defense. I'm willing to say a Vrabel defense with this much firepower on defense and crucial role players. I mean, we saw the Vikings defense be solid last year, and they just had role players everywhere. They traded away their best defensive player and got better. How many defense do we see like that? I do like a couple avenues of their weapons on offense. I do like the ability that Travion is not going to need to be a workhorse right away. He's going to be more of what Jameer was his rookie year, where he's getting touches that impact the game rather than like moving the pace of the game. He's going to be put in explosive scenarios. Again, I mentioned it earlier on the podcast. I might be Kyle Williams' biggest fan. I might be his biggest supporter. I'm in 3 Dynasty leagues and I own him in all three. I'm buying heavy stock into him. His time at WSU, he was utilized in almost every fashion, whether it was a deep threat, whether it was in between the chains. He was utilized a lot, and I really am going to buy heavily into what he can be in this offense. I've already seen some clips of him catching some deep balls and getting to celebrate with Drake. I don't love it, but I think at the odds that Zach brought to the table, I'm not gonna move away from a Vrabel-led team. But I think my opposing question for Zach more is, okay, we can make the argument where we all see the avenue of where this team could be a top 10 coach, top 10 quarterback. Those teams tend to just win games. Who are they knocking out of that? As we've brought Gino and Pete Carroll with the Raiders to the table. Most of the times, you don't see a first quarterback and coach duo like that succeed in year one, but they've played together. So I'm not necessarily ready to put them out. I'm obviously going to say Herbert and Harbaugh. I'm going to take above Jalen and Sirianni. I'm
Oh, and
intrigued
Sean
to even
Payton.
see some of the. We're not there yet. We might never be there. I
We
might
won't.
never be there. Let me correct myself. But Zach, I'd love to hear your take of like who are they knocking out of that type of tier?
That's interesting. I didn't put a lot of thought into who I'm taking them over. It is a little bit of a developmental take, as I kind of opened with. They're not there yet. I'm not ready to say Mike Vrabel is a top 10 coach in the league. I'm not ready to say Drake May is a top 10 quarterback in the league. Um, I, that's a hard one because I can see both of them in a vacuum breaking in. I can see Drake May from a tools perspective and from what he shows last year. If he makes a second year jump, I think, yeah, I'm putting him over. Let me sort my QB rankings real quick. And I could tell you a couple guys. I could see him. I mean, obviously, Bo Nix, Sean Payton. Yes, I think that's not even particularly close. It's not hard to see how if Caleb Williams has some of the same struggles that he had last year. Yes, he was in a lot of ways better than Caleb Williams was last year. I would need a list. I think I would need a list is the answer is to say really pick apart. I think yeah, I could easily see him being better than Pete Carroll and Geno Smith. That's one that I don't that's not hard to tell the story about how that looks better with Drake May and uh head coach Mike Vrabel. But I would have to really kind of dig into that a little more.
I think one of the things we haven't talked about is the offensive coordinator hiring. What's the dude's name? I just don't even remember off the top of my
McDaniel,
head.
Josh
Yeah,
McDaniel.
yeah, Josh
We have another
McDaniels,
McDaniel.
certified bum. He's a Wendy's worker in 3 years, maybe a
Ooh,
Burger
okay.
King worker in 3 years if we're getting hot. McDaniel sucks, and that's the only counterpart. But I do trust Vrabel in this scenario is that I do think that this team can get to an identity of just being tough, and that's how they win some close score games. But yeah, McDaniels kind of stinks. Don't throw any McDaniels stats at me. He stinks.
I actually think like that's really common right now. That's kind of like I wanna zig here. I want to get out in front of it. I think that Josh McDaniel is set up for success in New England. I think that obviously he's talked a lot this offseason about his progression as a head coach, about or not as a head coach, as a play caller, about how he kind of took a step away from the game and spent some time really learning the game in a more modern way, kind of really taking into account a lot more things that are being discussed from an analytics standpoint. He really took a step forward in the analytics part of his game. Now, I don't think, obviously, I want to see it first, but we think about what he does well. The reason he continues to get jobs, the work that he did when he was with Tom Brady. I think that he is great for a young developing quarterback. I think that he is going to be able to keep Drake May on schedule, on a developing schedule. And then also, I think that the passing game coordinator hire and Thomas Brown is a perfect hire. We saw the development with Caleb going from Shane Waldron to Thomas Brown. We saw just the way that he was able to sequence plays in a way that was much more beneficial for an offense to run. I think that he is going to have a role in just the play sequencing, the game planning of what they want to get to on a down to down basis. I think that Josh McDaniels, I think his role, why you bring him in, is not necessarily to win games through play calling in year one. They want to keep Drake May on schedule. They want to develop him into being that top 10, top five QB that he has the tools to possibly be. And I think that some of the minds, the offensive minds around him are going to keep him keep him on schedule. I don't think we're going to see the Josh McDaniels that we saw in Vegas. I think we're going to see obviously a new Josh McDaniels. He's talked a lot about his development, and I buy into the things he's talking about. I think that he's at least speaking as if he's figured some things out and is moving in a direction that I take myself in as a offensive mind. But yeah, I actually am not concerned about the Josh McDaniels offensive decision.
I think Thomas Brown. Thomas Brown was in the running for Seattle's offensive coordinator position, and I was pretty intrigued. I liked him in Carolina, and then in Chicago, I liked him as well. It is a little bit funny, and it's a little bit of a vanilla brain take, but you bring in a guy who's known for running the ball to come be your passing game coordinator. It is a little bit of a question mark for me, but I do really like Thomas Brown. You saw the night and day difference between Waldron and Thomas Brown and what they did in Chicago. And I think it fits the personnel fit in New England is that they don't have vertical guys to stretch the field. They're going to have to get really creative in utilizing even a Hunter Henry. Um, dare I say, is Kendrick Bourne still a New England Patriot? Pop Douglas is fun too. So I think that there's some room for creative. I like Thomas Brown. I do think that they're going to succeed, but I would bet against Josh McDaniels being in New England next year.
Oh, what would you bet?
Ooh, ooh. I don't know. We'll add that to our jersey jar, and we'll follow back in
We'll
a
talk
week.
next week on what we ended up going with there.
Yeah, Thomas Brown is kind of a funny one. He seems like a guy that in 5 years somebody will post an Instagram picture of him and be like, "Elite ball knowers name this head coach of the Chicago Bears." Because you forget he was the head coach for like 2 weeks. And also, kind of a funny note, we now have Mike McDonald on the Seahawks, Mike McDaniel on the Dolphins, and then Josh McDaniels on the Patriots again. So just some word salad to chew on and definitely get wrong. I mean, we're going to talk about these guys a couple times during the offseason, and I could 100% see myself putting the wrong name out there, putting some combination of Mike McDaniel John. I mean, there's just so many things that can go
George
wrong.
Pickens.
Dude,
How
I
many
still can't believe
touchdowns is George Pickens throwing this year? Has he
we
thrown
Oh,
botched.
one in his career?
I don't think
oh
so.
man.
Oh
Oh,
man,
that's
yeah, we
awesome.
botched that 2 episodes in a row. Zach talked about George Pickens with George Kittle, and I talked about Kenny Pickett and George Pickens. I mean, that guy just keeps coming up everywhere. You know, Jacob actually told me one time. He said the reason that he drafted George Pickens was because of that draft day picture. There was no tape eval, there was
Is
no
It's
that
iconic.
rankings.
Pure vibes. I love it. Pure vibes. Pure
Yeah.
vibes got him Caleb Williams over Bo Nix, and he dog walked you. So I'm going to trust the process with Jacob.
Hmm.
Oh, that was good.
Oh, I love that. All right.
I'm just
Yeah, you're good. I think that's all we have. Anything else you guys want to add?
Oh, this was a fun week. I look forward to what we bring to the table next week and expect a potential Josh McDaniels bet.
Oh, there you go. I love it. It's a pro tease. It's a cliffhanger, if you will. All right, we'll see you
I'm
guys
nervous
next.
already.
We'll see you guys next Tuesday.